You all know, I presume, that memory loss is not the first sign of dementia. If you avert memory loss, is not the first sign of dementia. It's a general characteristic of dementia, of course, but most cognitive function depends on memory in one form or another. So the first overt signs of dementia, in my experience, much more subtle, very hard to identify. And I would love if anybody here was interested in doing some research into the earliest signs of dementia using a partner of a partner who has got dementia, so that we could explore the earliest signs in the space that I'm going to talk about. Now, the title of this presentation is Love and Dementia. It could also be called Searching for Early Signs of Dementia. And I'd like to begin by reading a verse from the great Polish poet Wisława Szymborska, from one of her satirical poems, True Love. I quoted twice in this paper. It's both from the same poem, True Love. True love, is it normal? Is it serious? Is it practical? What does the world get from two people who exist in a world of their own? This is the aspect of love that is my major focus today. Two people who exist in a world of their own. Two people who exist in a world of their own. This world of their own is the shared space that develops between two human beings who are drawn together physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Over years of being together, they each come to know the other intimately. The space develops as a space of knowledge of the other and mutual sharing. The purpose of this talk is to suggest that this space, shared by two human beings, might act as a lens, providing a possible glimpse of the earliest signs of the development of dementia in one partner by the other. I would love this research to be done, I really would. And I know some partners perhaps are not very happy to address these issues, but it would be really wonderful. So we have a complex space created and shared by two human beings. It is mutual, it is intimate, it's private, it's ordered, and of course the fundamental basis of this space is it's emotional. So we're all in this space. I'm going to focus on three elements of this space in order to illustrate the potential for exploring the first signs of the onset of dementia. The privacy of the space, the order of the space, and the emotional attachment within the space. First, I will speak of the privacy of the space. As human beings, we are evolved to fear strangers. So this space, this mutual privacy, helps reduce fear and provides a kind of emotional security. And this space, this mutuality, is an important element in the development of trust. It's difficult to know that it's a chicken and the egg problem, the trust issue within this space, but that's another world. In trust, however, trust is an important element in the continuing existence and the ongoing development of this mutual space. It's an essential requirement of the space. Without this mutual trust, the space would not exist. For example, your partner may share aspects of the loving space with family, friends, or even strangers. How would you feel about this? Maybe it would depend on what was revealed. Your shoe size, your preferred sexual activity, or anything else for that matter. Would you consider any such sharing with others a breach of trust? Probably. Trust is created in this space, and trust holds this space together. It's a psychological glue. One of the fundamental elements of dementia is disinhibition, losing various inhibitions. And one of the potential problems of early disinhibition is that it can affect the privacy of the space through disregard for the rules of the space. These are often implied rules. And privacy is usually one of these rules, these fundamental rules. Now we come to the second factor in the loving space. It's related, that can be affected by dementia, and that is order. With order, we have predictability and security. Without order, we have unpredictability and chaos. Further to some rules of the loving space, here's another verse from Szymborska. Look at the happy couple. Couldn't they at least try to hide it? Fake a little depression for their friend's sake. Listen to them laughing. It's an insult. The language they use, deceptively clear, and their little celebrations, rituals, the elaborate mutual routines, it's obviously a plot behind the human race's back. Should read the rest of the poem. Rules, rituals, and routines. With dementia, the individual often changes from being consistent with respect to following the rules, rituals, and routines to one who becomes inconsistent and unpredictable. This cannot be a catastrophic black and white shift because that would be inconsistent with the development of dementia. It's more likely to be minimal to begin with than progressive and probably variable. Predictability is important in human life. Order is central to our social, our civil, and our personal lives. We are sensitive to disorder, very sensitive to disorder. If order breaks down, it can have all kinds of effects. And if someone you have lived with for over 40 years begins to behave in a different way, then there's a challenge. Is that time up? Oh, what a shame. Because now we come to something that gets me quite deeply. The third factor, emotional attachment. It's important in human life. We are nourished deeply by it. Emotional attachment is an extremely strong factor in supporting the shared life with a loved one. However, one of the early signs in various forms of undiagnosed dementia in close relationships is emotional detachment, apatheia. In the loving space, emotional detachment can be very disruptive, especially if it's perceived, as it often is, as rejection. It's an extremely vicious aspect of dementia. We usually respond to perceived rejection from someone near and dear with rejection of our own. This is the beginning of what can become a complex reciprocal process of emotional detachment, which can tragically lead to separation and divorce. Remember, nobody knows that anybody here has got dementia. Nobody. So all this is happening out of the blue. There's also a third kind of detachment. We live in a culture which prizes memory, intellect, freedom, reason, and autonomy. And when these are diminished, then so too is the person. I don't need to tell you folk this. Society detaches itself from the person and the carers. It's weird. It's not weird. It's understandable, but it's still weird. Dementia can be a massive social solvent. So if someone we care for can no longer relate to us, then we soon find that it is very difficult to relate to them. As the beloved individual person whose life, hopes, and dreams we may once have shared. They change and become detached from us. We adapt to that change and become detached from them, and then both are often dealt the blow of social detachment, and that leads, of course, often to isolation, and isolation is wicked. So to sustain the loving space requires at the very least continued emotional attachment, order, and privacy. As all these can be impacted by developing dementia, then there is little possibility that the mutuality of the loving space will remain in such a situation. And I don't need to tell you that this would add immeasurably to the carer burden in what was a loving relationship. However, this loving space is the place that I would look for the earliest signs of the development of dementia. And early signs would be helpful not for eventual diagnosis, but also for future planning, while the individual with the emerging signs of dementia may still be able to contribute to those plans. That would be absolutely unbelievably wonderful. So you can get some idea why I think this kind of research would be absolutely essential. All right. So getting back to Szymborska's question, what does the world get from two people who exist in a world of their own? Answer, tragically and hopefully, the potential for picking up early signs of dementia onset. That's that, okay? That's that. There is quite another different aspect of love and dementia that I would like to address briefly before I go home and lie down and have a sleep with my dogs. Didn't have any room for the dogs in that design. Thought that was a bit sad. When a loving partner is diagnosed with dementia, you enter a new world, the world of dementia care. I would like to share a personal experience that begins with a story from my childhood. I was born and raised in a fishing village in the north of Scotland, and when I was a boy on Friday afternoons after school, my friends and I would rush down to the harbour wall to watch the fishing boats return after 5 days at sea. The boats had left at a minute past midnight on Monday. They would never have left on Sabbath. That would have been absolutely outrageous. All Protestants, of course. And they would get drunk on Saturday nights and turn up at church on Sunday morning with the most terrible hangovers that you could see them. It was visible, and you could smell it. Very interesting to go to a service these days and not smell alcohol. Anyway, they'd come back about 3 to 6 o'clock on Friday afternoon after 5 days at sea, and they'd unload their catch, and then it would be sold the next morning at the market on the Saturday morning. The reason we went to the harbour wall was to see who could recognise the boats first as they came over the horizon. It was a vigorous competition, and in all the years I took part in this weekly ritual, I never once recognised a boat first. Now, there was nothing wrong with my eyes then. I was perfect vision, 20/20. Why didn't I recognise a boat first? Well, let me provide some background. In 1923, the Austrian philosopher Martin Buber produced an essay called I and Thou. And in this essay, he discussed, pointed out, or for the first time really, a distinction between the way we perceive human beings and the way we perceive objects. The relationship that we have when we perceive other human beings is the relationship called the I-thou relationship. And when we see objects, it's called the I-it relationship. All those years ago, I won't tell you how long ago it was. It's quite a long time ago. My father was in business. All my friends' fathers were fishermen. Their fathers were on those boats. And when I strained to identify a boat, I was looking for physical characteristics, for the name on the prow, for the placement of the cabin, for the number of masts, for the color of the hull, and so on. I was looking at the boats in I-it terms. My friends, on the other hand, were looking at the boats in I-thou terms, personal terms, since the possibility existed that the father they loved and missed might just be on the boat that they were looking at. I was just looking for things. So there's difference in motivation, crucial difference. I'm nearly finished. The development of dementia is usually seen as a progression of loss of function. Mental confusion, incontinence, apathy, memory loss, dysphagia, aphasia, and so on. This increase in our partner's dysfunction can change the way that we perceive our loved one. It is largely insidious. It creeps up on us behind us. During our caregiving, the way we see the individual with dementia can move from an I-thou relationship to an I-it relationship without us being aware of any change. Being totally embedded in caring for my wife, Heather, I was completely unaware that my perception of her had changed. I had stopped seeing her as my loving partner and started seeing her as an object of care. One day I had a brain snap. I remembered Buber's distinction, and I stopped thinking of Heather in terms of her deficits as a dysfunctional object and started to think of her again as the unique human being that she is. I didn't fall in love with Heather all those years or so, well, more than 40 years ago, because of all the amazing things she could do. I fell in love with a human being, a person, a lovely and wonderful woman. And that hadn't changed. I had just stopped seeing it. The dementia had blinded me to the love in my life, and this realization helped me to begin to see Heather in a different kind of love, an unconditional love, a love that persists and transcends the circumstances in which we find ourselves. It's a love that does not require reciprocation. This love enabled me to focus solely on who Heather is, not on what she could or couldn't do, what she could or couldn't share. Those of you with knowledge of ancient Greek thought will have detected that I've been talking about two different kinds of love today. Eros, the kind of love that creates a mutual space, romantic love, which requires this loving space in which to develop and sustain itself. The second kind of love I've been talking about is called agape. It's a kind of love that does not need reciprocation and can help in all kinds of ways. With this second kind of love, we're able to assert and support the personhood of our loved one without expecting anything in return. With this kind of love, we are able to support our friends and family. With this kind of love, we are free to open our life and experience to others. And with this kind of love, we can strengthen ourselves so that we can care for a person and not for an object. Thank you very much.